May I please have your attention? All candidates for admission, the guest speaker, at the conclusion of his or her remarks, will instruct you that in accordance with your pre-assigned numerical order, you are to each stand separately, announce your name, and then resume your seat. At the conclusion of the proceedings, the guests will remain in their seats until all the candidates have filed out of the courtroom in the same numerical order in which they entered. The candidates will be led to the third floor foyer, where they will sign the test book and receive their certificates. Guests are asked to wait for the candidates on either the first or the third floor. Guests are also asked to hold your applause until after the ceremony. If there's anyone who has cell phones, can you please turn them off now? Oyez, oyez, oyez. All persons having any business with the Honorable Court of Appeals of Maryland, draw your and give your attention. The court is now in session. God save the state. This Honorable Court, please be seated.
Good afternoon. And welcome to Annapolis, Maryland's historic capital city. At the end of the road by which most of you entered the court today, the city today, stands the Maryland State House. The State House has been the site of a number of events of historical significance, not simply to Maryland, but to this nation. I'll mention just two of them. The Treaty of Paris, which officially ended the Revolutionary War, was signed in the Maryland State House. George Washington resigned his commission as Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army in the State House, in the old Senate chamber there. Ours is also the oldest state house in the country, having been in continuous use since colonial days. Its cornerstone was laid in 1772. Welcome also on behalf of one of the oldest appellate courts in this nation, in whose courtroom we are presently gathered, Maryland's most venerable Supreme Court, known for more than 300 years as the Court of Appeals of Maryland. The ancestry of the court can be traced to the mid-17th century. That's more than 100 years before the American Revolution. The scarlet robes and white tabs which we wear are a part of this court's heritage. This is the judicial attire worn by our esteemed predecessors immediately after the Revolution. Consequently, we are not, notwithstanding the time of year, emissaries of Santa Claus. Now, I don't propose to review with you more than 300 years of the history of the Maryland Bar, but you might be interested to learn that the first lawyers formally admitted to practice in Maryland were admitted in 1666, when William Calvert, Daniel Jennifer, and John Moorcroft were accepted to practice by the provincial court. That court, formed in 1637 and consisting of the governor and his council, was the highest court of common law in the colony, and it also had both original and appellate jurisdiction. Unlike today, most of the 17th century lawyers practiced only part-time. They maintained their day jobs, as it were, as planters, clerks, merchants, entrepreneurs, and the like. And also, unlike today, there were precious few of them, not even a sufficient number to meet the demand. But stop, you say. You tired of hearing about the history? You want to get to the matter for which you came today. For you, the main event, you are being sworn in as lawyers of this court. We always require, and today will not be an exception, a light dose or sprinkling of commencement day rhetoric to be delivered by a distinguished Maryland lawyer. For that purpose, I call upon Sylvia E. Antonata Bernalis, I'm killing it, but that's okay, Esquire, who is the president of the Maryland Hispanic Bar Association.
May it please the court, Chief Judge Bell, distinguished judges of the Maryland Court of Appeals, honored and successful candidates, proud families, and guests. I am Sylvia Ontaneda Bernales, a member of the bar of this court, an attorney with Ober, Keller, Grimes, and Shriver in Baltimore City, and president of the Maryland Hispanic Bar Association. Before I begin my brief remarks, with the court's permission, I would first like to introduce to the members of the Honorable Court to the admittees and their guests. Beginning on my left, the Honorable Sally D. Atkins, Wycomico County, the Honorable Clayton Green, Jr., Anne Arundel County, the Honorable Glenn T. Harrell, Jr., Prince George's County, Chief Judge Robert M. Bell, Baltimore City, the Honorable Lynn A. Battaglia, Howard County, the Honorable John C. Eldridge, retired, Anne Arundel County, and the Honorable Mary Ellen Barbera, Montgomery County. Chief Judge, judges, it is my privilege to appear before you today to move for the admission of these candidates to the Maryland Bar. I would like to also add that it is a great personal pleasure to address you, the new admittees to the bar, and your families at this solemn yet joyous occasion. I am particularly delighted to welcome you on behalf of the Maryland Hispanic Bar Association to the practice of law. In this very moment converge the efforts, sacrifices, and achievements of the past. The satisfaction, relief, and gladness you all must feel now, and the promise of a bright and fulfilling future. I hope that you will always remember this day with fondness and pride. We all know that the country finds itself in the grip of an economic downturn, and that law firms across the board have reacted accordingly, revising their retention and hiring practices. As you face this new, more conservative employment climate, let me counsel you to never lose sight of your guiding star. Do not allow anything or anyone to dampen your spirit or professional aspirations, particularly when your dreams involve helping others. With the prospect of a job in sight or a position lined up in a law firm, or better yet, a job offer already in the pocket, remember that today you join a society of privileged professionals. Privileged in the sense that we attorneys are given the unique opportunity and responsibility to serve our communities while also exercising one of the most exciting, rewarding, and multifaceted professions. This alone is reason to rejoice. About professionalism, civility, and ethics, about being true to yourselves, to your firms, and to your clients, about being well-informed, well-researched, and well-prepared, about caring for your clients, your families, and yourselves, about all these values, and about the attributes of a great lawyer, much has been told you already, I am sure. And you will hear even more on these matters from mentors, senior partners, and colleagues as you journey along your own distinctive career paths. Today, I would like to focus on the idea of service. In doing so, I want to share with you what I learned from my mother, a woman who, as a young widow in Peru, my country of origin, raised 4 children on her own, and even now, at age 97, still reminds us to always eat a full breakfast, do things in moderation, and get a full night's sleep. Perhaps you've heard similar admonitions in your homes. But the lessons that most impressed me growing up, lessons that have been central to my personal and professional life, are rooted in the idea that our greatest purpose as human beings is to do good to others. My mother's simple yet absolute philosophical truths are found in old Spanish aphorisms like this one. Ojos que no ven, corazón que no siente. Eyes that cannot see, heart that cannot feel. In other words, if you are not aware of something, then your heart cannot feel anything about it because you lack specific knowledge. Sometimes we are too busy to see. Sometimes we choose not to see. It could be lack of exposure, procrastination, or selfishness that causes us not to see the hunger in the world, social injustice, abuse of power, and so much more. Whatever the case may be, the truth is that when the eyes cannot see, the heart cannot feel. Let me call upon you then to get involved, to volunteer at a community organization, to engage in public service. Your talents, skills, and energy are needed in many ways by many people. It takes special courage to act with compassion and humanity. choose to see and make a difference. Here is another one of my mother's sayings. Nunca es tarde para bien hacer, haz hoy lo que no hiciste ayer. It is never too late to do good. What you didn't do yesterday, do today. As lawyers, we have a social responsibility to contribute to the community in which we live. But often, balancing a career, family responsibilities, and other personal obligations becomes too much. Consequently, at some point in your career, you may be inclined to leave off or take off from your platter precisely those community activities that demand additional time and selfless giving. If you are forced to scale down or temporarily eliminate from your calendar participating in public service, do look for the first opportunity to fully engage again. You may win many professional recognitions and honors along your career path, of which you will be rightly proud. But making a difference in a person's life when no one else would or could do the job will be without compare. Let me urge you to join your local bar association, participate in pro bono committee or projects, call the legal aid service in your community, and volunteer as a pro bono attorney. Pro bono service is a way of paying it forward for the privilege of being an attorney. There are many different ways to provide pro bono services, and you should find one that fits your own personal circumstances. And remember that it is never too late to do good. Now, when we started to venture out into the world as college students and young professionals, my siblings and I would often hear this from our mother. Haz lo que puedas, con lo que tengas, estés donde estés. Do what you can with what you have, wherever you are. So whatever plans you have made for your future, whatever opportunities may await you, whatever obstacles or challenges you may encounter, remember to do good, particularly to those in need. In today's depressed economy, legal aid programs are struggling with ever smaller budgets to meet the increasing demand for pro bono services. There are the homeless and the veterans, the elderly and people with disabilities, the economically disadvantaged foreign nationals who do not speak English, and the asylum seekers, the abused woman, and the neglected child. The list of those in need of legal aid is long. Many of these people will have no access to justice unless you help, unless you step forward to fill the gap. You've chosen a noble profession, one through which you can help others in these particularly difficult economic times. Attorneys have a proud history of service to their communities, to their state, to their places of worship, and to their local and specialty bar associations. Let me recommend you continue that tradition. Wherever you are, do what you can with what you have. And if you do not have anything else, remember this: you possess the keys to access to justice. Whether the case you take involves averting foreclosure, or a heart-wrenching family matter, or complex criminal issues, or a simple name change. I do not think I can stress enough the importance of engaging in pro bono services. So let me add these words of wisdom. The day is short and the task is great. It is not incumbent upon thee to complete the whole work, but neither art thou free to neglect it. This old quote appears in the Legal Conscience, selected papers of Felix S. Cohen. Cohen was a lawyer and a scholar who taught at Yale and Rutgers, among other law schools. He helped shape federal Indian law and won the right to vote for American Indians in New Mexico and Arizona. Cohen fought many forms of oppression and became an advocate for the rights of immigrants and minorities until his death in 1953. In this light, allow me to share one more important lesson I learned from my mother about conscience, a most demanding taskmaster. She had this to say: La conciencia es a la vez testigo, fiscal y juez. Conscience is at once witness, prosecutor, and judge. In America, perhaps more than in any other nation, we protect and value the rule of law. And the rule of law, which has made this country great, is enshrined in the Constitution. Justice William O. Douglas remarked that the Constitution is the nation's conscience, and that the Supreme Court is the keeper of the conscience. As attorneys and officers of the court, you will be sworn to uphold the Constitution and defend it. But as individuals, each of you alone will answer to your own conscience, of which you are the only keeper. In closing, then, let me encourage you to maintain your humanity, step up and help wherever you see a need, to the best of your ability. The road mistaken is always the higher one in moments of doubt. For no title or honor or amount of wealth can replace your reputation and integrity. And don't forget, listen to your mother. Best wishes and congratulations to you all. Now, with the permission of the court, I move for the admission to the Bar of Maryland of the candidates seated here before you. I request, in accordance with a pre-assigned numerical order, starting with a candidate here in front of the podium, that the candidates please stand individually, announce your full name, and then resume your seat.
Candace Marie DeMar.
Terrence Ryan Decker.
Laura Christine Bellisbury.
James Anthony Dunbar.
Rahel Hollis Gamboa.
Angela Jean Desoners.
Mark James Keeble. Jonathan David DiCarlo.
Jacqueline Moldemar. Meredith Ann DeMont.
Joanna Lee Manuel.
Charles Earl Dickinson.
Jennifer Lee Sigmund.
Brett Michael Deep.
Julie Marie Deep.
Jonathan Peter Dick.
Anna Elizabeth Bingo.
Christopher Smith.
Tammy Joe. Monica Mosley Bungie. Carol Giselle Lamar.
John Paul Hampton Douglas. Jason Gregory Downs.
Carly Dick.
Samuel James Schroeder.
Emily Connor Tracy Mansfield. Celia Anthony.
Jonathan Howard Dunn.
Catherine Kit Dyer.
Brian Joseph Dillon.
Diana Ashley.
Mahasan Shakriya Ali.
Lisa Ashley Elder.
John Paul Eldridge Jr.
Kristen Nicole Johansson. Jennifer Ann Ellis. Maya Julia Ellis. Cecilia Mount Mosley. Tina Einstein. Maria Dorothy Mullet. Karen Marie Evans. Lindsay Kendall Eiler. Elizabeth Claire Farlinger.
Matthew Stephen Walker. Joseph William Betty. Daniel Zachary Down. Elon Micah Favorite.
Suzanne Mara Ferreira.
David Herring Fiala.
Christina Mary Pink.
Anna Kathleen Day.
Joseph Francis Fiala.
Christy Ann Fisher.
Thomas James Fisher Jr. Patrick Colby.
Jane Leah Quinn.
Let me thank Ms. Antonada Bernales for her very thoughtful, inspirational, and uplifting remarks. I also learned a lot from my mother. It is now time for me to inquire whether there's anyone in the audience who wishes to rise in opposition to the motion. Well, you know, you have to ask. Judge Eldridge will be responding for the court. I wanted to point out that Judge Eldridge, as you've heard, is retired. Ordinarily seated in that seat would be Judge Joseph F. Murphy, Jr. from Baltimore County. Judge Eldridge.
Chief Judge Bell, my colleagues, Ms. Antonada Bernales, candidates for admission and guests, the court congratulates you and with pleasure welcomes you as new members of the bar. You've just received excellent advice, so I think I'm going to talk about something else, a little history. Having found yourself in a building that is somewhat modern in appearance, you may have been surprised on entering this courtroom to observe its traditional interior. Courtrooms haven't been built like this in recent years. In fact, in many, many years. This building, which was dedicated 37 years ago, replaced the former Court of Appeals building located on State Circle, just across the street from the State House and the Governor's Mansion. The former court building no longer stands, having been demolished to make way for an office building for the legislature. The former Court of Appeals building housed this court for 70 years. Now, the beautiful wood paneling that you see was originally installed in that courtroom in 1903. It was dismantled and brought here in 1972, together with this mahogany bench. To a degree, the traditional atmosphere of this courtroom may suggest to you something of the heritage with which you're about to become associated. Thus, I'm going to make a few remarks about the long and proud history of the Maryland bench and bar. The Maryland judicial system is one of the oldest in the United States, having been authorized by the Charter of Maryland in 1632. By 1637, the governor and members of his council began to sit as a formal court for the province. This court, from 1942 until the Revolution, was named the Provincial Court. The first case filed in that court, which there's still any record, was a debt action for payment of a sum of money due for beaver furs. As Chief Judge Bell indicated, the Court of Appeals of Maryland is probably the oldest appellate court in the country. It really dates from 1664, when the first writ of error was issued for the governor and his council, sitting as a Court of Appeals, to review a decision of the provincial court. The case of Stone v. Borman, decided by the provincial court in 1658 and reported in 1 Harrison McHenry 1, was the first published case in the American colonies. No other state's reports go back as far as Maryland's. Speaking of the Maryland reports, what is apparently the longest reported case in those reports, Canal Company versus Railroad Company, taking up 273 pages in Ford, Gill, and Johnson, was argued in this court on behalf of the appellee by none other than Daniel Webster. Unlike his numerous legendary triumphs, Daniel Webster did not prevail here. His client, the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, lost on a 3-2 vote. Nowadays, it would be 5-4. The judicial system of Maryland's earliest period is quite different than today and may seem quite strange. The provincial court was the main trial court. It also entertained appeals from the county courts. The county courts were the predecessors of today's circuit courts. The provincial court originally consisted of the governor and his council. These men also constituted the upper house of the legislature. In addition, they sat as the Court of Appeals. The structure was based somewhat on the English system, where the upper house of Parliament, the House of Lords, is the highest court, even today. As Chief Judge Carol Bond wrote in his history of the Court of Appeals, quote, "Appeals were from a group of judges to themselves under another name." Chief Judge Bond added, quote, "The wonder is increased by the fact that on such appeals, reversals of the judgments rendered in the provincial court were proportionately numerous." It was not until 1692 that judges were appointed to the provincial court who were not members of the council and the upper house of the legislature. And for a period of time thereafter, some of the same persons continued to be judges of both the provincial court and the Court of Appeals. It was in the middle 1700s that judges who had sat on the trial of a case began to recuse themselves from the appeal. It is perhaps because of this, the colonial practice, that one of the provisions of the first Maryland Constitution, which has been retained in every constitution since, is that a judge may not sit in a case if he was involved as a judge in the lower court on the same case. In the earliest days, there was no particular restriction on the practice of law. A person who had studied law could appear in the court on behalf of someone else. In 1666, the legislature passed a statute forbidding sheriffs, judges, court clerks, and other court officers from practicing law in their home counties. They could practice law in other counties. That same year, the first formal bar admissions took place. The first ethical guidelines for attorneys, including a fee limitation provision and a command to avoid unnecessary suits, was enacted by the Maryland legislature in 1674. The oath, which you will take shortly, had its origins in that statute, although today it is worded quite differently. Thus, you stand here today as the most recent participants in a ceremony, a tradition which is hundreds of years old. The membership of this court bar, people who practice law in Maryland, are a significant part of our heritage. The first woman lawyer in what is now the United States practiced in Maryland. Her name was Margaret Brent, and she came to Maryland from England with her sister and two brothers in 1638. Although she had many suitors, Miss Brent refused to marry, and thus did not incur the disabilities which the common law imposed on married women. Miss Brent was educated in the law, and she began representing clients in the Maryland courts during the 1640s. In Miss Brent's first case, for example, filed in 1642, she represented one of her brothers as plaintiff in a suit for 3,000 pounds of tobacco, allegedly owed by one Marmaduke Snow. A few days later, she filed her second case in the provincial court, representing someone named Edward Packer, in a suit demanding 460 pounds of tobacco. Between 1642 and 1650, Miss Brent's appearance was entered in the provincial court 134 times. She also served as the attorney for the second Lord Baltimore, and as such was the de facto Attorney General of the province, although the title was not used then. She was also the legal representative of Governor Calvert's estate. In addition, Miss Brent was credited with stopping a mutiny in the colony's militia, using her charm and diplomacy and the Lord Proprietor's money to keep the peace. While serving as the Lord Proprietor's attorney, Miss Brent demanded a vote in the legislature, since her male predecessor in that office had been given a vote in the legislature. She appeared before the legislature to plead her case. According to the historians, she was so eloquent that the members of the legislature believed that she should have a vote, but the governor would not permit it. As one historian has pointed out, she was probably the first suffragette in this country. Regretfully, not all women enjoyed Miss Brent's opportunities. In 1901, this court, an opinion by Chief Judge McSherry, held that a woman could not practice law, even though she had graduated from a Maryland law school. The case was in Ray Maddox, and it's reported at 93 Maryland 727, if you want to read it. The opinion fails to mention Maryland's early history concerning the subject. Fortunately, the ruling lasted only 1 year, as the Maryland legislature in 1902 passed a law providing that women could practice law in this state. The author of the Maddox opinion would no doubt be surprised to learn that there are now so many women members of the bar, including 3 of his own great-granddaughters. The Maryland bar has had numerous prominent members. Luther Martin was a Maryland delegate to the United States Constitutional Convention and was a nationally recognized trial advocate. He defended Aaron Burr in his trial for treason and won an acquittal. He also successfully defended United States Supreme Court Justice Samuel Chase of Maryland in the impeachment proceedings against Justice Chase. He served twice as Attorney General of Maryland and also as a Maryland judge. Unfortunately, Martin was not noted for his foresight as much as for his legal skill. He never saved any money from practice of law. And when he suffered a stroke and could no longer practice law, he was reduced to poverty. What happened next is indicative of Martin's high repute as well as the collegiality of the Maryland bar. The Maryland legislature, at the instigation of the bar, passed an unprecedented statute. It required every attorney in the state pay a license fee of $5, the entire proceeds of which were paid into a trust fund for Martin's support. Another Maryland lawyer, Francis Scott Key, is best known today as the author of our national anthem. You may not be aware, however, that it was in his capacity as an attorney that he came to write the Star-Spangled Banner. One of Key's clients had been taken prisoner by the British during the War of 1812. Key went to the ship where the client was being held to negotiate for his release. While Key was on board the British ship, it attacked Baltimore City and Fort McHenry, and the Star-Spangled Banner was one result. The other result, in keeping with Key's reputation as an excellent attorney, was that he succeeded in obtaining his client's release. The distinction of the Maryland bar is not limited to these local achievements. 4 Maryland lawyers signed the Declaration of Independence. Maryland lawyers have served as justices of the Supreme Court, most recent being Justice Thurgood Marshall. 6 Marylanders have served as Attorneys General of the United States, and others have been Solicitors General of the United States. This proud heritage of excellence is a mark of the Maryland Bar, and the judges of this court look forward to seeing you enhance the reputation which our bar enjoys. And now, turning to the business at hand, we sincerely welcome you as members of the bar. The motion for admission is granted, and Mrs. Bessie Decker, the clerk of the court, will administer the oath.
The candidates, please stand. Raise your right hand and repeat the oath in unison after me. I state your full name. Do solemnly swear or affirm. That I will at all times. Demean myself fairly and honorably. As an attorney and practitioner at law. That I will bear true allegiance to the state of Maryland. And support the laws and Constitution thereof. And that I will bear true allegiance to the United States. And that I will support, protect, and defend the Constitution. Laws and government thereof. As a supreme law of the land. Any law or ordinance of this or any state. To the contrary, notwithstanding. You may be seated.
Three things, and then we will close out these proceedings. The first is to remind you that these proceedings are on the webcast, and they will remain there for the next 2 to 4 weeks. So if you are inclined to relive these proceedings, you may do so by going to our website, or you might invite others who are not able to be here to watch the proceedings on the web. www.md.gov. Second, unsolicited advice. You didn't ask for it, I'm giving it. As you leave the court and you enter upon your professional careers, please keep in mind the words of that greatest of all of the philosophers, Bill Cosby, who said, "I don't know the key to success, but the key to certain failure is trying to please everyone." Finally, many, perhaps most of you, simply would not be here today were it not for the ever-present support and encouragement of your families and friends. On your behalf, permit me to express to them your heartfelt thanks and deepest appreciation, coupled with your pledge to them, and indeed to all of the citizens of this state, that beginning today, you will embark upon your own personal crusade to add additional luster to the bar of this court and to the legal profession in our state. And on this upbeat note, this court will stand adjourned until 2:15 this afternoon. In the meantime, it might well be in order to give this newest group of Maryland lawyers a round of applause.